Polls have just opened in Egypt, where people will begin voting for the country's first freely elected president. And the two remaining candidates are the Muslim Brotherhood's Mohammed Morsi and Hosni Mubarak's former Prime Minister Ahmed Shafiq. Let's show you some live pictures we're getting from a Cairo polling station, and which opened its doors to voters just in the last few minutes. It's not really known what the turnout across the country will be like following calls for a voter boycott by pro-democracy activists. And they're angry over Egypt's highest court decision to dissolve the country's lower house of parliament. But let's find out what is going on right now. Our correspondents are covering that vote in cities right across the country. We have Mike Hanna standing by. He's in the capital, Cairo, and Jamal El-Shayal, there he is. He's in the coastal city of Alexandria. Jamal, I'll come to you in just a second. But first, Mike, over to you. So it's finally come down to these two men.
Well, indeed, yes, Darine, there is no parliament in this country. There is no constitution. The military holds both legislative and executive power, basically ruling by decree. That is the circumstances under which Egyptians are going to vote the man who will be the next leader of this country, not knowing exactly what powers that president will have. Events of recent days left a cloud over these proceedings. Certainly the dissolution of Parliament, a major blow to those who saw the elected body as the way forward in this country's morass, as it has been for a number of months. The inclusion of Ahmed Shafiq rejected by many who see him as a remnant of the old guard. However, his inclusion welcomed by the millions who voted for him in that first round. Just a few percentage points separated Ahmed Shafiq from the man who came top in that first round. That is Mohammed Morsi of the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood has been debating intensely in the last 48 hours what it should do in the wake of the Constitutional Court's decision. It has decided to go ahead with this election. It insists that its candidate will win, and in so doing create a backdraft against the actions by the Constitutional Court, which the Muslim Brotherhood is convinced the military itself is behind. But let's take a look at Mohammed Morsi, and here's Shireen Tadros with a look at that contender.
He was not the Muslim Brotherhood's first choice, but then again, its election campaign has always been more about the organization than the man. Mohammed Morsi is a senior member of the Brotherhood, but was not well known. Brotherhood financier Khairat al-Shatir backed Morsi to lead its political arm, the Freedom and Justice Party, last year. 60-year-old Morsi is known for being conservative, forceful, and not too popular within the organization. Although he's got better at public speaking during the campaign, his style and demeanor is not what wins him votes. It's the vast structure he has supporting him. The Brotherhood has promoted its candidate as the one who can deliver on the revolution's aims and bring the economy back from the brink of collapse. Morsi also tried to ease fears of women and minorities, especially Coptic Christians, guaranteeing them their rights would not be threatened under his presidency. He also promised to resign from the Freedom and Justice Party if elected. But his critics still worry that despite Morsi's assurances, it will be more senior members of the Brotherhood like Khairat al-Shatir or even the Supreme Guide Mohammed Badia who will end up running the country, making it more socially conservative and allowing the military to retain a prominent role. Morsi has already said that he will choose his defense minister only after consulting with the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces. In an election that pits old against new, at least Morsi has the edge of appearing new. The question is whether that's what the Egyptian people are looking for.
And Mike, now that Parliament has been dissolved in Egypt, which in fact was Mohammed Morsi's power base, do people believe that that could affect his chances of winning this runoff?
Well, that's an open question at the present. The speculation that maybe as a reaction to that Constitutional Court action, there may be a swell of support for Mohammed Morsi. The issue is whether or not those who voted for other contenders in the first round of the presidential election will back either Mohammed Morsi or Ahmed Shafiq. Some speculate that anger at the ruling Supreme Council of Armed Forces will translate into greater support for Mohamed Morsi, Ahmed Shafiq being identified in the eyes of many with the Supreme Council of Armed Forces being, of course, Hosni Mubarak's last Prime Minister. But the polls are now open. The judge has arrived at this polling station. Well over 1,000 polling stations throughout Egypt as people go to the polls. Some 46% voted in the first election. A key issue about who will win this will be how many go this time. Doreen?
All right, so Mike Hanna, we'll talk to you a little later on. For the time being, thank you very much. Mike reporting from a polling station over in Cairo. There's Jamal El-Shayal. He is at a polling station over in Alexandria. Jamal, just tell us how turnout is right now and what's going on behind you.
Well, Doreen, the doors have literally just opened a couple of minutes ago, and the number is pretty impressive in terms of the turnout, people queuing up, as we've seen throughout every vote or election that has taken place since the revolution, people coming out to make their voices heard. Obviously, there are those who are doing it out of fear, concern that maybe they won't have another chance to do this if one of the two candidates, which different sections of society have reservations about, actually wins. There are those, for example, who thought prior to the dissolution of parliament, if Mohamed Morsi of the Brotherhood had won the elections, then we would be back to a one-party state. Now there are others, for example, who believe if Ahmed Shafiq wins, it will be back to a militarized or a military ruling country. Let's take a look at Ahmed Shafiq, his profile, and those who would be supporting him. He's a man who failed to convince Egyptians he was good enough to serve as their prime minister. Now, Ahmed Shafiq is hoping the people will elect him as their president. But it will be a challenge because those who led the country's revolution loathe Shafiq. That said, he does have a significant support base. Shafiq once headed the Air Force, and many of his supporters point to his military credentials in their belief that Egypt needs a strong president. His campaign is centered on security and restoring what he describes as the rule of law. But his opponents are concerned by what that could mean. They point to one of the revolution's bloodiest days, February the 2nd, 2011. On that day, Shafiq was the prime minister, and it's alleged he did nothing to stop the killing of protesters in the heart of Cairo. Shafiq is not without powerful friends. Some of Egypt's wealthiest businessmen back him, many of whom made their money during Mubarak's rule under questionable circumstances. Shafiq's opponents argue that the businessmen are only interested in protecting their money. Shafiq himself is accused of corruption, going back to when he was aviation minister and oversaw the building of Cairo's new airport. Although one of his campaign slogans is "An Egypt for all," many have accused him of fear-mongering. From the start of the election process, Shafiq has billed himself as the only candidate capable of countering the growing power of the Muslim Brotherhood and other self-described Islamists. He's warned voters that the Brotherhood will drag Egypt into what he calls the Dark Ages. That kind of talk has resonated with many of Egypt's secularists and Christians, further polarizing society. But the Brotherhood's candidate, Mohamed Morsi, argues that he's the man Egyptians must vote for if they want to save the revolution. For Shafiq to win this election, it could very well come down to whether more Egyptians fear the Brotherhood than they do a former member of the Mubarak regime.
Jamal, Ahmed Shafiq himself came in second in the first round of the presidential elections in Egypt. So from that time until now, what's he done to sort of broaden his support base?
Well, nothing really, because it was a surprise for many that he came in second. So it's actually been more of the same in the sense that he has been going very strong. The lines of security, the lines of countering what he describes as the dangers of the Muslim Brotherhood and Islamists, and going on the lines that he will, one of the famous stances he says is that he will restore security within 24 hours. No one's sure exactly how he's going to do that, but the idea that he is the strong candidate, the man who is going to essentially run the country with an iron fist, is something that he hasn't actually shied away from. But it's important to note here in Alexandria that whilst Shafiq came second across the country, Shafiq actually came fifth in Alexandria in the first round. And Alexandria has a history of being opposed to the Mubarak regime and opposed to much of its policies, and therefore it will be very interesting to see whether those numbers will increase here in Alexandria or whether the trend of anti-Mubarak policies continues and is translated in the ballot boxes.
Jamal El-Shayal reporting from a polling station in the city of Alexandria. Thank you very much, Jamal. Just a reminder to our viewers that polls in Egypt opened just about 11 minutes ago, in fact, where Egyptians are choosing between two presidential candidates. And you can read all about those presidential candidates by going to our website. There you'll find profiles of them as well as live blogs from Jamal and Mike Hanna. There are teams on the ground, all that at aljazeera.com.